Listeners, we have Nagesh Kukunoor. These are a Hatke filmmaker with us today. Nagesh, welcome to Taranga.
Glad to be here.
Nagesh, since we are talking about you as a filmmaker and your journey, how you became a filmmaker, I thought we'll start with your childhood, because sometimes the childhood memories and the influences that we have are there with us for the rest of our lives, probably unconsciously sometimes and sometimes consciously. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up, where you studied?
Okay. For the most part, I'm a Hyderabad boy.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Hyderabad. Other than my years in a boarding school, I was raised in Hyderabad.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like you said, the childhood plays a very, very important part in the kind of person you end up becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And mine was no different. For the most part, I had a very normal childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing which is very interesting, which sort of stands out
Mm-hmm.
when I'm asked by a lot of people about my childhood and what my friends remember of
Mm-hmm.
me and what my cousins remember of me, it's interestingly the fact that when the summer holidays rolled
Mm-hmm.
around, and obviously Hyderabadi summers are pretty brutal.
Right.
You're not allowed to run around, and our parents were quite strict that at
Yeah.
least during the afternoon hours you had to stay indoors.
Stay at home, yeah.
That during the period of us being locked inside or not allowed to go outside and play, I would sit and tell stories.
Wow.
It's very strange that most of them remember that. The fact that I would sometimes tell the story of a film I'd seen.
Mm-hmm.
Or my sister had actually pointed this out a few years ago, that I would actually just concoct stories
Wow.
on the fly.
I see.
just make them up as I went along.
Okay.
And I had an audience. I
Mhm.
had people who actually sat and listened to me, which was very interesting. And when she started telling me about some of the stories I used to tell, and not all of them were sane, some of them were pretty warped.
So it's like in Hyderabad, especially when people fib, you say fake na mana hai.
Yeah.
So it looks like you used to fakeify a lot.
Yeah, Pink Now was definitely something that I did, but it's something that I had done and I didn't consciously remember. The one thing I clearly do remember
Mm-hmm.
is in class, whenever there was a free period,
Mm-hmm.
I was called by whichever teacher minded the class to come to the front of the class
And tell a story?
And tell a story.
Wow. So you were a storyteller since then.
I think at the core of the being I was,
Mhm.
and somehow life gets in the way. As a kid, your imagination's vivid and
Right.
it's
It runs wild too.
expansive.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you go to places in your mind, and of course, back in the days when we were growing up, the only form of stimulation were books.
Mhm. Yeah.
TV still wasn't around.
Absolutely.
Movies were few and far in between.
Right.
So either based on books or a movie that you saw,
Right.
your imagination soared wild. And I guess in mixing all of that,
Mhm.
I would concoct stories and I would tell it to the people around me.
Mhm.
And some were really bizarre. Some were really.
So do you remember
warped.
any of these bizarre stories?
One running theme which was very common
Mhm.
was the fact that I loved these ensemble pieces, which was my own version of the Avengers, I guess.
Mhm.
I used to have several superheroes banded together,
Wow.
and they straddled many different countries and places.
I just have to say this here. It's very interesting what you're saying, because right now we do that with our kids. We bring Ram, Superman, Lakshman. Everybody is there in these stories. All
Really?
superheroes come, they go everywhere. Hanuman is there, they are there, and along with them, their dog is there.
Really,
Yeah, and it's just like for fun, we just do it so that
Yeah.
whatever movies they have seen.
yeah.
So everybody is there in this whole life, including them.
Yeah, and I pretty much, I think, did the same thing. If I read about the Lone Ranger, then he was there. Then I used to read these war comics, so some sergeant from there was in that. There was Superman. There were some Desi heroes from movies, but they all banded together to do something.
Okay.
So this was a running theme. I also remember that I wrote this. I tried to call it a novel, but I think I only ended up writing about 25 or 30 pages.
Okay,
But,
so it's a novella.
it's a novella, if you will. And it was called The Diamond Horse, and it was a robbery. There was a horse.
So do you still have that?
Somewhere, yes. My mother saved it, and
Okay.
I found it years later, and it was amazing because I read it, and in a strange way, I was so heavily influenced by American movies, American material. I mean, movies, again, like I said, few and far in between the ones that made it to the theatre, but in the form of comics, in the form of pulp fiction. I started reading James Harley Chase very, very early.
That's what I was going to ask you next. You know, like you said, you used to read a lot of books.
Yeah.
So, which were your favorite authors at that time?
Growing up, I started off with a little Enid Blyton way back in the beginning, but
Famous
then
Five and
exactly.
Yeah.
Then shifted to, there was an Alfred Hitchcock Presents The Three Investigators, so I
Yeah.
did that. Then of course the Hardy Boys. They
Okay.
were a huge part
Yeah.
of my 5th and 6th grade. When I just stepped into the 7th, and I remember this specifically, I picked up my first James Harley Chase.
Okay.
And I didn't understand a lot of it, but I loved that crazy noirish world. And that was true pulp fiction. I mean, that
Right,
was,
right.
just or hard-boiled detective stories, I think is what they were called. So I loved this hard-boiled fiction and stuff like that, and that kind of sparked my imagination. And I think Diamond Horse was some little bit influenced by that and the Hardy Boys.
Okay.
So it was about this, robbery of a horse, of diamonds
diamond.
that were shaped
Okay.
in the form of a horse. So I think the dominant thing that you're seeing here is the fact that I love telling
Stories. Yeah.
Other than that, I was a very normal child. Participated in all kinds of sports and did stuff like that. I was. Interestingly, I was good at academics, and I've always said this, that sometimes that ends up being a not so good thing, because when you do that, your parents, again, middle class upbringing, so and based on the peers around you, people just naturally assume that you'll be a doctor or an engineer.
It's interesting what you pointed out about middle class, because at that time, that was the only, education was the only, I
Way
think,
out.
way out for middle class
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
because there was no property as such for them to live off their lives.
Yeah.
So the only way was to get ahead by education, get a
Yeah.
job, and take care of your family.
Yeah.
So anything to think beyond that or away from that, I don't think at that time parents even encouraged people to go into sports.
No, not sports, not the fine arts for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not even business management or a lawyer.
Yeah, and even into finance or
No,
any of these things were.
Interestingly, you became a CAA if someone in your family or father was in the business, or if you didn't cut it as an engineer.
As
if
in you're a doctor. Yeah.
I remember so many friends of mine couldn't get a seat into MPC, so they ended up doing MEC and became chartered accountants.
Right.
So it was, So there was no conscious thought at that time, other than the fact that, like you said, education was a necessity to sort of achieve your dreams.
Right.
But I remember even as a kid, the dream for me was to go to the States. It was not, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life past that point, whether it was an engineer, but it was just this mystical, magical land
Right.
that I wanted to go to. So I did what every middle class boy should.
So you mentioned something about storytelling, and
Yeah.
you just got a point, dreams. So did you dream that you were in these stories also at times? Just curious.
I might have put myself into a couple of these stories, but I don't. Actually, you should ask my sister and the people around me who actually remember these stories, because it's funny. And I think this is something that has stayed with me even now. Even now, when I finish a script, I completely, once the script is done, there are so many nuances about a script that I completely forget. It's not that, there's complete clarity and I remember stuff. I just do the script and then I forget. So I think, once I tell the story,
it's done for you in a sense.
Yeah, and it's out of my system and my brain doesn't retain much. It's a very, very strange thing, but I don't remember myself specifically in these stories. I don't.
I think we should ask, like you said, your sister or your cousins, like who were your audience at that time, like how you were telling the stories. So we should probably get it from their angle.
Absolutely. Again, summer vacation, mangoes, heat, and locked up afternoons with these stories.
So your mom didn't give you the amlas, the gooseberry that they say as usirkai, because that was another popular thing during summer.
It was, but I don't think anything can come in the way of mangoes.
Mangoes, that's true. Summer and mangoes, it's like
it's what makes
summer special in India.
Absolutely, and life worth living for when summer rolls around, because otherwise it is such a difficult time, if you will. I mean, you have summer vacations, but you have all these restrictions, and especially as boys growing up, you're not. You don't want to be at home a single second. You just want to run out into the streets and stuff like that. Yeah, but summer mangoes made everything worthwhile.
Cool. So I hope you're enjoying the mangoes this season too.
Oh, absolutely. That goes without saying. And there is a little bit of a myth in the industry, but most of it is true. No matter where I'm shooting, I have my mangoes flown out from Hyderabad.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
Okay, it's a myth, you said. So let me ask you: is it a myth?
That's why I said it's kind of a myth, which is true. So yeah.
Cool. That's great, because you get so many varieties here. It's like.
I mean, mangoes form such an intrinsic part of who we are as Indians that each one, and it's true, if you do a Wikipedia search, you'll get ample proof of this. Each region claims their mango as the king of mangoes.
So that's true.
So, for example, the Maharashtrians and Bombay and this myth have
Apus
as the king. The Hyderabadis have either the Himayat or the Banganpalli. The UP folks have Chausa.
And Langda also for them.
Yeah. The Bengalis to Langda for sure. Delhi's Dasheri and so on and so forth. So it just depends on.
And you still didn't talk about in Andhra what they say, like, they have different other
Himayat or Banganpalli, these are it. Especially if you grow up in Hyderabad.
Yeah.
The snooty Hyderabadi is still, myself included, believe that Himayat is it.
Is it, yeah.
But a second poorer cousin who's still bloody good is the Banganpalli.
Yeah. True, absolutely. Even now, I think it still stays the same.
Yeah.
Himayat rules over Banganpalli.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people say that Himayat, the Banganpalli is a poor man's mango.
Yeah. It is.
Because it's more, I guess Himayat is a little cost prohibitive for most people.
It is. It is. And it's not grown as widely, which is kind of interesting. Because now with the middle class having... I'll just take a step back. When growing up, Himayat was clearly a wealthy man's mango, because it came in very small quantities for a very short period and you were done.
Right.
Now, because the middle class has grown and they actually can afford it, you can get Himayat for a much longer period of time.
Right. Yeah. So, so is there do you guys also made some specific dishes with mangoes? And we're talking about childhood, there's...
Right.
So...
of course, these were the... initially the pre-refrigerator days, and then when we could afford it, we got a single Kelvinate. I remember that that refrigerator stayed in our place for about 25 years. Of course, you did the mango panna, if you will, raw mango, which was boiled and made into a kind of sharbat.
Yeah,
I remember that. I always remember eating mangoes whole. Yeah, just
I think nowadays, because we have refrigerators, you can store it, you can freeze it and stuff, and that time, because that was not that prevalent,
Yeah.
As soon as the mango comes, you got to eat it, and before it got spoiled, because you need to get the next round in.
Absolutely. And there was always, a little bucket of water where
In which you would
the smaller mangoes, the not so expensive ones, were all thrown in there, and then you could run riot.
Yeah. So, which area did you grow up in Hyderabad? Which school did you go to? And what are your school memories? Any scary teachers, or did you scare the teachers?
I grew up in an area called Vithalwadi. The large area is Narayanguda. Of course, that time that was in proper Hyderabad. Nowadays, if you actually talk to people about Narayanguda, they have no clue, because the Hyderabad that's grown outside our traditional borders, Jubilee Hills and Madhapur, Kondapur and Gachibowli. We still can't reconcile that it's Hyderabad.
Okay.
Because it's it's way over there, and it's something that's grown as opposed to grown recently as opposed to something that existed
was
for
there earlier.
A long
Earlier
time.
Secunderabad station was the border, for Secunderabad and Hyderabad, but now
and Secunderabad was still considered a newer city. It was very much there, but as compared to Hyderabad, it was still considered a newer city. So I grew up in Narayanguda, and initially I went to grammar school in Abbots. I was there till my 7th. I remember my sister studied in St. George's Girls' Grammar School, and I was in Boys' Grammar School. And so the two of us went in the mornings, and in the evenings when we had to come back, we could take a rickshaw home, and we were allowed to pay 50 paisa to the rickshaw. And if he asked for 60, then we walked home. A lot of times we said no, and kept walking till. And my sister and I were kind of disciplined in that respect. And I remember my brother, who went to St. Paul's School, would, whatever the rickshawala asked, he would just jump in the rickshaw and come home.
So is he the elder one?
No, he's the younger one.
He's the younger one. Okay. So you're the eldermost? Or?
No, my sister's the oldest.
Okay.
I'm the middle child, and I have a younger brother.
Okay.
So
the younger ones usually get away with everything.
They do, and there was some kind of responsibility that mom said 50, so it was 50, and my sister and I very strictly adhered to this. And so many evenings we walked home, because no one would come home for 50 paise. But
so in your house, a lot of people say that the middle child usually, like the first child, they say is the parents' pet, because the firstborn.
Right.
Then the second one comes, okay, so the second one is there. But when the third one comes, the third one becomes the pet. And the middle one is na idhar ka, na udhar ka. A lot of people tell me that. So...
lucky for us, we didn't have that. I was the first son, so to speak. So, I think, instantly gravitated towards mom. That's a very natural thing.
Yeah.
My sister was the first child in the house, so it was a big deal there. And then I came along, but my mother was very clear that she wanted a third child as well, and so they ended up getting my brother. So we didn't have the traditional thing where the middle child is left kind of wanting, but what I do remember is I felt this, and it was not thrust upon me, but I felt this responsibility as being the older son.
Okay.
To do stuff, and that played very heavily, I think, on my mind and in my psyche when I went to a boarding school, which is what happened after my 7th grade.
So which boarding school did you go to?
I went to a boarding school called Montfort High Secondary School in Yerkad in Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
And the years I spent there, I think, seriously shaped the kind of person that I eventually became.
So I'm assuming that had a big influence on Rockford when you made it?
Absolutely. Rockford was written from several diaries that I maintained when I was at school. And it's based on my experiences, a few of my brothers, and a couple of other friends of mine.
Okay.
So my brother and I both went to the boarding school.
Okay.
And I ended up being the elder brother who had to kind of
So you took care of your younger one.
Sorta.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was by design or not.
Okay.
I don't think anyone actually said, mom might have said, you're the older brother,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be careful. And that boarding school was prohibitively expensive in
Mm-hmm.
those days.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad felt very, very strongly about sending us to a boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it was a little beyond his means,
Mm-hmm.
he never held back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of responsibility also played on my
Played on
head.
your mind, yeah, that you have to take care of it and make good use of the time.
Absolutely.
Spent there.
And so I'd be very careful at school. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think in a certain sense, even though we are wired a certain way, my sense of frugality and, kind of simple living also stemmed from that.
Mhm.
You had to be careful,
Careful with money,
money
yeah.
and all that. That is a very middle class thing.
Right.
And I think parents unconsciously
Mm-hmm.
pass it on to their children
Right.
with a simple whisper in the
Mhm.
ear saying, you got to be careful,
Careful,
and the kids pick up from that
No, I
point.
think part of it also because you see your parents struggle through or
Yeah.
live through month after month, because when you said middle class, there are budgets, you had to make sure that this budget is for this. So you see your parents do that.
Absolutely.
So it's you imbibe it unconsciously.
Yeah.
Maybe like you said, part of it is consciously, but most of it is unconsciously. You don't think about
Yeah.
it the next time when you.
Yeah. But the beauty is, it's something that is taught very early to you, and I think it's stuff we forget.
Mhm.
Is one doesn't require much to actually get by, and as kids, you did that kind of proudly.
Mhm.
You never consciously did that, but you were.
Right. You're
And-
happy with whatever you have, so you don't think twice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you get older, everything starts playing on your mind, and you have your social boundaries and this and
Mhm.
that, and all kinds of stuff that. But in reality, those lessons that you learn as a child, I
Mhm.
think, for the most part, end up staying with you.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely true. You mentioned boarding school, and then so you were back after boarding school.
After boarding school, I came back to Hyderabad.
Okay.
Let me step back a little. Why I always keep saying that, the boarding school kind of made me the person I am is.
Mhm.
Boarding schools are very interesting places
Mhm.
where there is an unspoken sort of society that kind of governs itself.
Mhm.
There's an unspoken law. There are leaders, there are followers,
Mhm.
there are rules, regulations, and everything, and completely under the radar of the adult world.
Adult, okay.
And you learn very early
Mhm.
in a boarding school that you either have to fend for yourself,
Mhm.
and kids can go one way or the other,
Mhm.
and you emerge stronger,
Mhm.
or then you just
You could
fold
be a
up and
wreck. Okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm lucky that I went the other way,
Mhm.
because there's no one to call for advice. There's no one to call for help.
Mhm.
And again, mind you, this is the pre-telephone days. Forget
Right.
cell phone.
Mhm. Yeah.
My school had one telephone in the brother's office,
Mhm.
and you had to have special permission. A special time was set up, and it was trunk dialing where a call was placed and everything. So, interestingly, when communication from the outside world is cut off,
Yeah.
you start to develop your own personality.
Mhm.
And like I said, you can go both ways.
Right.
And
I think it builds your character, like you mentioned. It
yeah.
shapes it up.
there's no choice.
Mhm.
You have to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing in when you're a day scholar is you keep some of the stuff bottled up,
Mhm.
and then you come home and your parents take care of it.
Right.
Here, if you don't resolve it right then, you can keep it bottled up, but
Mhm.
you can't come back to anyone. You have your only peers to, and there are
Peers and your
pluses and
friends.
minuses.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there aren't, but that school, just taught me to be
Mhm.
self-reliant, be very cognizant of the fact that a lot of times you are by yourself,
Mhm.
and you have to make those decisions, the difficult ones. And sometimes it results in failure, but failure is not all that bad.
Mhm.
And all this kind of rationalization you do as a child,
Mhm.
which now as an adult you can actually analyze and
Mhm. Yeah.
take care, but as a kid you're not consciously thinking of things, but you're making all these decisions. And the last thing, the simple thing about the school was the fact that they focused very heavily on overall personality development. So when I went in, I remember I was very good at academics,
Mhm.
but I had one other thing to my credit, is I played cricket
Mm-hmm.
pretty decently.
Okay.
But in the years that I spent at that school, I learned to play soccer,
Mm-hmm.
field hockey, volleyball, basketball, table tennis,
Mm-hmm.
badminton, tennis, and
All the sports.
all these pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Swimming, diving,
Mm-hmm.
elocution, extemporaneous speeches, getting up on stage for plays, everything.
So everything. So it was like a complete like personality development, not in just, and physical development too, because those are important for
Absolutely.
your physical well-being. The sports part.
Absolutely. I learned to box.
Wow.
That-
Okay. So do people know that you box?
Well, there was a little bit of it in Rockford.
Okay.
But yeah, and I was going to make a movie on boxer last year, and it kind of fell apart at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that's another sport which teaches you character in a big way,
Mm-hmm.
teaches you to overcome your fears. So things like that. And when you, as a child, you're so open to stimulation and you're so excited,
Right.
and each new thing, you're like, oh wow, and then you
Right.
start to
You
learn
start doing
that.
it. Absolutely. Yeah.
It was a great time.
So when did this storyteller become a writer? You mentioned that you started keeping a diary when you were in the boarding school.
Writing is like many other crafts.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that has to be worked at on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young and stuff like that, you write certain things, but you don't actively work at it.
Mm-hmm.
You write school essays, you
Yeah,
write,
yeah.
people say, hey, good job,
Good
and
job,
that's
and
that.
Yeah.
You never actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think my first concerted writing
Mm-hmm.
actually came as late as when I got my first job.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it was all the way in the States,
Mhm.
and the company had a monthly newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
and just goings on about the company and stuff like that. Different people
Mhm.
contributed articles, and this poor secretary who put it together would come around every month and say, guys, you got to help me,
Give me an article.
give
write
me an
something.
article, give me photographs, do something, and with great reluctance I wrote one piece once,
Mhm.
and it came back with a lot of favorable response. I mean, people said, that was pretty funny and it's interesting. I was like, really? So I started writing
Mhm.
these articles for the company newsletter, and
Mhm.
it's something that I've saved. It's something that I cherish a lot. Every 3-4 years I kind of go back and read them,
Okay.
and it also reminds me of a wonderful period in
So
my
maybe
life.
you should, put it on your blog or something, what you wrote.
Right now,
Mhm.
when writing becomes work,
Mm-hmm.
and to a certain extent I always feel when you have to blog,
Mhm.
it becomes work.
Mhm.
When you want to write about stuff and it's just something that eating you up inside, it's one thing. But when you have to blog, I think that's when I shrink.
Hmm. So you're saying that when it comes out to you naturally, if it's just an impulse for you to write, it comes out better. Whereas if you have to do it, yeah. But I think it's true of anything. When you have to create something, if it becomes like it's a responsibility, it's not the same. Whereas if it,
In contrast,
Mhm.
when I write a script,
Mhm.
I'm very, very strict about the amount of time I allow myself on a script. I only give myself 30 days to write on a script.
So when you write on a script, you already have the story with you, right?
Well, not true.
Not true. Okay.
Because you have a germ of an idea.
Mhm.
You kind of know where you want the story to head, but a script, a
Mhm.
film script,
Mhm.
is way more than just a story.
Mhm.
It's description, it's directions,
Sure,
it's
sure.
dialogue.
Mhm.
It's
And who
so-
says what? What's the emotion? Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything.
Lot of things
So,
are there.
you have a little bit of an idea and then you pursue it. So
Mhm.
there I write with a very, very strict amount of discipline. Somehow outside of my scripts I'm not able to do that.
Mhm.
And I do believe
Mhm.
that writing requires discipline.
Mhm.
Because like everything else, why do you go to work every day? Because only when there's a little bit of structure,
Mhm.
do things
Yeah.
actually fall into place. But I'm unable to do that for my freewheeling,
Well, probably you just don't have the time.
No, I don't think I have the inclination. Because I think if you want something bad enough, if you like something a lot,
You'll do it.
you'll make time.
Mhm.
You will make time.
Mhm.
But this somehow has eluded me, and for years I've been telling myself I should blog. Occasionally, when someone will force me, I'll end up writing an article, but it'll be literally the day it's supposed to be delivered. At the very end, I'll write it.
So we'll come back to scripts, but
Okay.
I think we should go back to your
Okay.
study days. What was the, like, let's say, the strangest experience or the most fun-filled experience from your boarding school?
The boarding school had, rewards in the boarding school were few and far in between. So when you actually got them, they were terrific. I mean, it was such joy. One of the things that we truly enjoyed was every Sunday we went for a walk outside. I mean, I'm making it sound like a prison, but it was such a structured British system that when you actually got a chance to go outside, and we did what were called long walks and stuff like that, which was a mini trek, if you will.
This sounds like one of the stories from either Enid Blyton, or when the kids go to a boarding school and then they come back for vacation, or during the boarding school, what happens.
Yeah.
So looks like it's kind of like your book life has come into your real life. Did you feel that at that time?
I think the sense of excitement that was there in the boarding school was just intense. And then we had these annual championships, and this is what spurs the competitor in you. It encourages very healthy sort of competition for so many different things. We had different trophies. We had an academic trophy, we had a cultural trophy, we had a sports trophy, we had an overall trophy. So you felt that you constantly had avenues that you could go in and prove yourself. And we had our annual drama night, and these were some serious highlights. We had what we called an annual picnic, where
so which of these did you win to give you feel that joy? I'm sure you must have taken some of the trophies, if at least part of a team, or
no, I did. I the academics were always my turf, so I was I'd get a lot of prizes there. But this whole cultural and literary world opened up to me. I got pretty decent at a lot of sports, but I was always in a group sport. I played soccer and I played cricket and stuff like that, but I never, the individual sports, I was okay. I was not that great. But when it came to drama, when it came to elocution competition, debates, all these, I was very much a part of the
winning team.
Yeah, I mean, reasonably.
Okay.
I would say a good many times. I would.
So any not so happy moments? Because usually when you read about stories which are placed in boarding schools, there's always a teacher or somebody which are depicted as, like,
tyrants.
The tyrants, or not so not so jovial people. Did you have any experience? I'm sure that is there even in regular schools.
Correct.
But I think in boarding schools, because there are no parents, like you said, to go back and to comfort you, I think it's just gets accentuated over there.
Yeah. Now that you ask me, I would say that my boarding school life mimics my movie life, in the sense that the movie life highs are so intense and beautiful. A movie does well, good reviews, whatever. And the lows are terrible, because it seemed like you failed the final exam and you got nowhere to hide. And the boarding school was exactly the same way. When you had these things, let's say we had compulsory sports every day, and that day, let's say you scored a goal in soccer, or a couple of goals, and you made sure that your team won. The buzz at the dinner table was like, oh my god, this is something, and you were just the champion. And then when things did not go well and you had no one to turn to but yourself to fend for, it was traumatic. And I dealt with that in Rockford. Again, like I said, there was a certain law of the land. So if the boys felt that you did something wrong, and the universal rule in the boarding school was that you never snitch. You could never ever, no matter what was done to you, right or wrong, it stayed amongst the boys. You never went to the authorities. And if you went to the authorities, then the boys ostracized you. And that was the worst thing that could be done.
So in a way, it's like a team spirit, like you stayed within the team and you used to fend for yourself, like you said, and
Those were the rules. You never broke them.
Mhm.
Your friends rallied around you,
Mhm.
and while your kids, friendships form and break
right.
every other
Every
day.
other day.
And interestingly, a lot of those friendships stay with you for the rest of
Yeah,
your life.
yeah.
But there were some really, really traumatic moments in a boarding school. I remember this one incident which I sort of dealt with in the film.
Mhm.
Was one of the boys actually told, and again you have leaders and
Mhm.
all these unspoken rules and setups which only the school knew existed, like I said, under the radar of the adult supervision.
Mhm.
So he told the boys and the class leaders and everyone that I had snitched against some other boy,
Mhm.
which I hadn't.
Mhm.
But anyways, so instead of bringing the fight to the council, if you
Mhm.
will, and getting the
Okay. Man, you're making it sound like a mafia thing, It's
it
like
is. If you've seen Lord of the Flies, it was
Mhm.
it was like that. So they said, okay, since he snitched, then no one shall talk to him, and at dinner table, no one gave me food.
Wow.
There was 7 to a table,
Mhm.
and when the food came, everyone just grabbed it and they passed it amongst themselves, and they wouldn't give it to me. And I was in shock. These were all my best friends
Mhm.
at my table, and no one was talking to me because the diktat had been sent from the top. So it was things like that. And then of course then I went to the council and said that that was not true, and there was misinterpretation, and they said, really? And so they ostracized the other boy. So and then eventually that boy and I ended up becoming really good friends. So there was this idiocracy and the joy of being a child. But I remember incidents like this. And one other very, very strange thing, it's funny I'm mentioning it, but when 10th grade rolled around, and I told myself, I said, there was one thing in the school again, that you never cried.
Mhm.
And the boys who cried were considered wimps.
Okay.
So I sort of made a promise to myself when 10th grade rolled around that I wouldn't cry.
Mhm.
And it's the strangest thing, because that's something that I've carried forward into my life.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I do make movies with emotional scenes.
A lot of emotional scenes, if you say.
Right. And I just watch it quite, I won't say dispassionately, but I am not moved with the whole process. I mean,
don't you even get a tear in your eye once in a while in some of the movies?
Very rarely. I mean, occasionally I will. I remember once being on set, and when Aisha in Door broke down, I got completely choked up and I got misty-eyed. But now, as I've gotten older, post 40s, that's when I'm actually
More
the
emotional?
cracks are happening. Yeah, I can see a lot. But otherwise, it was pretty well bottled up all these years.
Wow. Because I cry from ever since I was a kid. Any emotional scene, I cry even now.
See, but I tell this to women, you have no idea how lucky you are. You have your perfect pressure cooker release,
Okay.
stress release,
Could be,
everything. I mean, there's ample scientific proof that, your
right.
hormones kick in every time you cry.
Well, I don't think I cry for those, but movies, every time Sholay, I've seen Amitabh Bachchan die. Even till this day, I see Sholay and I see that scene where Amitabh dies. I don't cry as I used to as a kid, but then my eyes do turn up misty,
I will occasionally shed a tear or two in a movie. I won't deny that, but it's it's quite rare even there. And my stuff doesn't move me at all, because obviously I was there on the set at that time. For me, it's very clinical. This is
you've been
this is
there,
a close up, and this
yeah,
is a wide, so it's really not strung together to make any.
But do you feel anything when you're editing a movie or at the end of it, when there is a scene, something like when you see the end product?
You can't. It takes many, many years before you can actually sort of break away from your film.
Okay.
It takes many years because for me and for most filmmakers, it's such a technical process that part of the brain doesn't kick in. The part that relates to something at an emotional level doesn't kick in, because the technical stuff is so much in your face. We were there.
Right, you're so busy making the movie and different aspects of it. Yeah.
And we are focusing on the small little things that will make a difference. So as a filmmaker, you're so involved in the small technical pieces that make a film that you don't see it as a whole. And even if you see it as a whole, there is no subjective. And when you're watching a film, you cannot be objective. You can only be subjective.
Yeah, perhaps when you watch also, you're still looking from that perspective, whether it has come out properly, is the scene proper, is the lighting, did it come out, do I have to reshoot or something?
Absolutely. And being in the film business, even when you watch another film, you kind of imagine the camera swooping in like this, and the moment you imagine that, you've extricated yourself from the process of enjoying the film.
Movie, yeah.
So it's a curse.
So coming to college life.
Yeah.
So you finished your 10th in the boarding school.
Right.
So, and then back to Hyderabad.
Then I came back to Hyderabad to Little Flower Junior College. And at that time, we just moved to our new campus in Opal. And but those 2 years in Little Flower Junior College, when I think about it, there is nothing favorable about that period. Because those 2 years were just spent studying.
Yeah.
And like every student who's ever appeared for the engineering entrance or the medical entrance knows that those 2 years form the most critical years, with the pressure of trying to get into all these schools and all that. So that's all I remember. 2 years of torture.
I don't think it's any different. It probably has become worse now.
Really?
With so many entrance exams and...
At least now the seats have increased. Their options were limited. Back in those days, you did your engineering entrance and you had Osmania University or JNTU or some of their affiliated ones. Otherwise, you dropped to, in Hyderabad, you dropped to CBIT. And that was it. Then you had to go outside to the donation colleges. Yeah. And if you went to a donation college in a middle class environment, that was an insult. I mean, you were a loser. At least that was the perception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So you studied and you busted your butt just to make sure that you got into. So that's what those 2 years, man. And I remember my dad telling me, and my dad's been one of the coolest in terms of he never forced the kids into anything. But he said, if you want to get into engineering or medical entrance, you have to believe that these 2 years are not yours. You have to just say that these 2 years, you're just going to study and he said that'll open up the rest of your life, which was 100% true. Because everything that happened after was just because of me getting into engineering.
So you did your engineering at Osmania
University.
So how did you go into chemical engineering?
Again, the beauty of Indian education, no one really knows what they want. No one really ever. I mean, education systems worldwide are broken because they are very archaic systems. But in India, I still think it's a step back because no one ever questions anything. It's just do this, do this, do this. So when I came to engineering, of course, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And everyone wanted to do electronics. And computer science had just come out because that was the new thing.
The next one probably was electrical in the line.
No, it was mechanical.
Mechanical, okay, yeah.
Mechanical was the next. And then, during my time, electrical had dropped.
Okay.
And chemical was making a stronger push. In rank still, people went for electrical, but chemical was making a very, very strong push.
I think the chemical industry was also just picking up at that time, perhaps.
And it had taken on the mantle of being like an engineering major that could actually lead to good jobs, better jobs, whatever it translated to. So, so I went into chemical, but there was no conscious choice. I remember, if anyone's done the engineering entrance, let me tell you how it actually works. Based on your rank, you're called to the counseling is what they call. What that is a large blackboard with a matrix with the schools and the engineering majors and the number of seats that are left.
Okay.
And as each boy's rank is called up and he picks his thing, the numbers are reduced.
Okay.
So while you sit waiting for your turn to come, you can see, Osmania University mechanical has closed,
okay.
Electronics has closed, okay, CBIT still has these 2 or 3. JNTU has 1 electronic seat left in Anantapur.
Okay.
You see this matrix unfolding in front of you, and you're making your life's
Choice
choice
based
looking
on
at
that
the
thing.
matrix. And I remember so clearly when my turn came up, I had I think electronics left in Anantapur, and people said, "Oh, take Anantapur and then use your dad's influence and
to moving back to
to Hyderabad."
Yeah.
But I kept looking at the board, and in the matrix, I had chemical engineering left in Hyderabad.
Okay.
And I said, if I stay in Hyderabad, Dad will buy me a motorbike and I can ride coolly to college instead of going and living in a hostel somewhere.
So that's what made the decision.
And I remember I had CBIT computer science. And the day before my interview and counseling thingy, I went to meet a friend. And he had gotten into engineering entrance the year before or 2 years before. And he said... and he went to Chaitanya Bharati, CBIT. And he said, man, in a million years also, if you get anything in CBIT, don't take it, because every day the commute is an hour and something to school. And that's what I based my decision on.
Well, it's interesting that you say, because many people do that, because it's like what your friend took,
Yeah.
or your friend didn't take, or something like that. And
but how ridiculous that... But I also say this, because we have an average level of intelligence, we're able to cope with these stupid decisions. Because, you know, I became a chemical engineer because of that. Someone said, and then I imagined myself, I said, oh, Osmania is only like 6 kilometers from home. I can ride my bike, it'll be cool, and this and that. And so I dropped any other major I saw in Chaitanya Bharati. I mean, I could have been in something in the computer field. Who knows?
Well, then probably you would not have been a filmmaker. Who knows?
Who knows? But I always say this. I think the engineering field is meant for very stable, I won't use the word boring, but people. So it's one of the branches that really forces you to look elsewhere. That field really requires an enormous amount of discipline. It requires... a kind of, like I said, stable is the right word. It requires a person to be able to do the same thing without tiring for a very long period of time. And I remember, consciously maybe I didn't, but once I became an engineer, I would always think of this and say, oh my God, I can't imagine doing this for the rest of my life. That is terrifying.
So was engineering terrifying for Nagesh? What were his influences during this time? And how did the storyteller enthrall his friends? Stay tuned and find out in part 2 of The Journey of Nagesh Kukunoor. Only on Taranga, it's your wavelength.